Good afternoon, everyone. Mayor Ben Walsh, and it is my great pleasure and privilege to welcome Secretary Buttigieg to Syracuse, along with Senate Majority Leader Schumer and Senator Gillibrand. We are lucky to have two great senators representing New York State, and we just finished a really productive, albeit brief, roundtable discussion. We focused much of our discussion on the transformational opportunity that we have for this entire region, but as we pursue this opportunity, the importance of focusing and centering our efforts around those that have been impacted by the legacy of this highway and those that live within its shadow today. We also talked about the importance of creating good-paying, living wage jobs in the city of Syracuse in this region. I'm very excited and optimistic about the future of this project and of the relationships with all the leaders here. So with that, I will introduce the leader, our Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. And I first want to welcome so many of the distinguished people who are here. My great colleague, who I'll introduce in a few minutes, Senator Gillibrand. Our wonderful, wonderful Transportation Secretary. He's here, folks. He said he's Secretary Buttigieg, our great mayor, you heard from Ben Walsh. Our Onondaga County Executive, Ryan McMahon. Our two state senators from this area, Rachel May and John Mannion. Our Assembly member, Al Sturpey. And we have two people, we have our great Syracuse Common Council president who's been fighting so hard for this, Helen Hudson. And maybe someone we could call the father of I-81 who's been pushing for this forever, the wonderful Van Robinson. We also have representatives of the Central New York buildings trades. We have our president, that's Mitch Latimer is here. We have Dika Dansel from the Urban Jobs Task Force. We have Lanessa Owens of the Syracuse chapter of the New York Civil Liberties Union. We have Bill Simmons of the Syracuse Housing Authority. And Rob Simpson of Center State, CEO of Center State, with his always new haircut. Okay, so it is great to be here with everyone today. And I'd like to thank, on behalf of myself, Senator Gillibrand, and Mayor Walsh, we all invited him before he even got sworn in. I said, will you... What's that?
It was him.
Will you come to Syracuse? I said to the secretary, will you come to Syracuse and see I-81? And he said yes, and here he is. So I thank him. We want to thank him. So let me say this, folks. This will be, we gotta get that thing working. This will be the most transformative project Syracuse has seen in decades. And I say three words signify it: justice, jobs, and safety. This project will bring justice, jobs, and safety. President Biden singled it out as a project of interest in his American Jobs Plan. It was the only one. I-81 from Syracuse was mentioned. And he recognized, as we do, that with federal investment, highways that previously upended communities could be rebuilt to reconnect them to jobs and economic opportunity. And that is why we are here today. As we work, I want to promise all the folks here, I want to promise the residents of Central New York, I will use all my power as majority leader to get I-81 funding here in Syracuse. Let me talk about justice, jobs, and safety. We must do that by including our Reconnecting Neighborhoods Act that Senator Gillibrand and I are pushing, which would set aside funding specifically to remove or retrofit highways that create obstacles to mobility, opportunity, and create and exacerbate racial divides. Very important. And we will do this with a permanent extension of local hiring the local folks for these good-paying jobs, union jobs, good-paying jobs, and long after this project is finished, God willing, those folks will have good-paying jobs and earn good salaries for the rest of their lives. So important. And we talk about safety. This is such an old highway. It may have been modern and new in the 50s, but it is old and out of date. The accident rate on the interchanges on the I-81 complex are 4 times the accident rate in similar areas and similar complexes in other cities. So we have justice, reconnecting communities, jobs for the local community, and safety for everyone in this area who will use I-81. Now, we all know the history. While it serves as a key transportation artery, its original construction displaced members of the 15th Ward, the majority of whom were black. It divided this wonderful city and contributed to the decline of neighborhoods in its shadow. Now, the debate on how to replace I-81 extended for over a decade. You press people will know. Every time I would come to Syracuse in the last decade, they'd say, which plan do you prefer? And I would always say, the community's got to come together, and then we will get the funding. I want to salute the entire community, the elected officials, the appointed officials, and community folks like you for coming together on a plan we can all support. You have come together, now we have to bring the funding, and we will. So thank you for doing that. The decision to tear down the highway and create a community grid is the right decision. We may have to tweak it and make some changes here and there, but it's the right decision. So, as the federal government's reviewing the plan, we will push any infrastructure bill that has the Reconnect Communities Act, that has the full funding for it, that has the funding for our Jobs Act, and we will get that done. It's part, let me give you a little more about this. The Reconnecting Communities grant to which we will apply has the American Jobs Plan that President Biden submitted provides for $25 billion for reconnecting communities and other other infrastructure investment in Syracuse. As I said, the president named Syracuse, only named I-81 in Syracuse when he mentioned it. It involves the following: community engagement, that's why we're so glad you're here. Education, capacity building grants to help community members participate in the original planning. You will be part of the planning. That's new, and that's good. Then, it has the second phase is planning and feasibility grants to help the state and local agencies design the projects and assess the feasibility. And then the big bucks, the capital construction grants to fund the construction. Those are the 3 steps in the bill. So that's what we're trying to do. And it means that we're going to connect to local residents, especially minority, veteran, and women's workers, and we are going to create good-paying construction union jobs here in Syracuse. The local hire pilot program, which again Senator Gillibrand and I have worked on, is vital to making that happen, and we're going to make it part of the Build Back Better bills. Very, very important. So, it's a great day. Working in harmony, all of us will get this job done. And as I said, we will transform Syracuse in a way it hasn't been transformed in decades. Now let me turn it over to somebody. You couldn't have a better person. He comes from a city not that different than Syracuse, South Bend, Indiana, a town that had a lot of manufacturing, a lot of it left. It has a big university, Notre Dame, a wonderful place, almost as good as SU. and many other similarities. So this secretary knows what we're going through, knows what we need, and is on our side. We're so grateful for him to be here in the great city of Syracuse. Our great secretary, I was going to say Mayor Pete, but that's no more. Our great Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader Schumer, and I will always answer to the name of mayor. I think once mayor, always mayor. And I want to thank you for your leadership, Senator Gillibrand, for everything that you've been doing on this and so many issues. And they're right. They encouraged me before I even had this job, for sure, to get out here, and I'm so glad we've been able to do it. I know Representative Katko couldn't be here, but his office is represented. Mayor Walsh, to be with you, to be with all of the community leaders here, state, local, labor, community. It really says a lot about what can happen when a city like this is committed to moving forward. And as everybody here knows, all of the other issues we talked about, jobs, safety, prosperity, racial justice, cannot be separated from transportation. That's part of why we're here. Every decision about transportation is necessarily a decision about justice. It's a decision about our future. And to understand our future, we got to learn from our past. It was 65 years ago, actually today, that President Eisenhower signed the bill creating the Interstate Highway System. And it was an extraordinary achievement. But we know that the planners behind it also made choices that often routed new highways directly through black and brown neighborhoods, doing lasting damage to those communities. And one of those highways is right next to us. I-81 was built, as the leader described, right over and through the 15th Ward and displaced nearly 1,300 residents from what had been a close-knit, middle-class black neighborhood. Those who remained were cut off in many ways from opportunity. And over the next few decades, much like my own hometown of South Bend, Syracuse lost about 30% of its population. And now the city has been rebounding in an extraordinary way, and yet these consequences and this legacy is still with us. So right now, the State Department, the mayor, the county, the community are reimagining in partnership with so many other partners, including the federal government, reimagining 81 to better meet Syracuse's needs and reconnect those communities that were once divided. And it's not just Syracuse, although this is a remarkable place to illustrate what's happened across the country. It's why the President's vision of the American Jobs Plan is so important. It's a once-in-a-century opportunity to create the future of transportation, learning from our past, and doing better. You know, that can write a little applause. I want to make sure everybody understands just how historic the bipartisan framework that was agreed to will be. It is a generation of good-paying union jobs, the majority of which are available to workers whether they've got a college degree or not. Yes. And that's incredibly important for blue-collar revival in this economy. The largest investment in roads and bridges since that day that President Eisenhower signed that bill. The largest investment in public transit federally ever. Yes. And a whole lot of other things to be very proud of, including passenger rail, which you know is a passion of the President, as well as my own. We need to act now to expand our vision of what infrastructure means. That's why the internet pipes belong in this bill right alongside roads, bridges, and highways. All of that is necessary for prosperity, and all of that is considered in this framework. But even more than that is at stake, because democracy is being put to the test. And the President believes that this is a test of whether democracy can deliver for our citizens better than the autocratic regimes that have been in a race with us to define what values will dominate the 21st century. That's really what this is all about, and that's why we need to act right now. I just want to take a moment to talk about why equity is at stake in our transportation decision. When you hear a racially loaded expression like the wrong side of the tracks, you know that expression, we've all heard it. And we sometimes forget that's a transportation image, because often it was literally the tracks or the road that divided one part of the community from another that served to segregate a city. And that's why we are now looking at every program we've got through the lens of equity, including the authorizations we already have. Even as leaders in the Senate and the House work to do more, we're making sure that our grant programming is built with a view toward equity. We're making sure that those who actually live in communities where these projects are located get the opportunity to work on them, get the opportunity to get on them, get the economic opportunities that come to this. And it's why we are reviving the Department Office of Civil Rights, which had a shocking number of vacancies when we arrived in Washington.
Guess why?
But it's going to get the support that it needs, and I know that our friends in the Senate have our back on making sure that happens. So again, to Syracuse, a community that reminds me so much of my own hometown. I so admire and want to salute the spirit that has brought this community back, that is moving this community forward, and you will always have a friend in the Biden-Harris administration, many friends in the Biden-Harris administration, rooting for this community to succeed and ready to celebrate the triumphs that you're going to put up on transportation infrastructure and in so many areas of your future. Thanks for the chance to be here.
Great job. Okay, now it is my real honor to introduce my true partner in New York. And let me say what an amazing senator she is. She has two aspects, many more, but two that I'd like to focus on. First, she has a big, real heart. When she sees people who are suffering, when she sees people who have been denied justice, when she sees people who need help, it's not just an intellectual reaction. It's right here. I see it all the time here in New York and on the Senate floor. But she combines that wonderful heart with an amazing brain. She is one of the most, she studies everything. She is really smart and she's able to put it all together. So she doesn't just have that compassion and that empathy, but she is able very effectively to put it into effect and make it happen and help the people that we all so much want to help. So without further ado, let me introduce my dear friend, our great senator from New York, Kirsten Gillibrand.
What a privilege it is to be here. Senator Schumer has been not only a stalwart for Syracuse, but for our whole state and frankly our whole country. And he has been at the forefront of this bill, this idea, these goals, certainly for the decade that I've been in the U.S. Senate and decades before that. He understands how important this is to the community, and the great thing about Senator Schumer is he is the majority leader. He gets to decide. So we couldn't be more blessed with Senator Schumer. He really has been extraordinary. I really want to recognize Chancellor Syverud for hosting us here at the Center of Excellence. It is such a amazing piece of how important Syracuse to this community has been.
And with her modesty, that Senator Gillibrand and I helped get some real funding for.
Money's for, yes we did. Well, we have a lot of visionaries in this community, I'll tell you that. Mayor Walsh, thank you for hosting us. We're very grateful to you for your leadership. And I want to recognize our secretary. He really has taken this job by storm. He has traveled all across the country with such dedication to working people and understanding what it takes to bring communities together. So, Mr. Secretary, thank you for your leadership and your vision. You are an amazing asset to President Biden and the Biden-Harris administration. It's a pure joy. And I want to thank all our local leaders. To Van and Helen, thank you for being at the forefront of this from the beginning. May, you were one of the first to give me advice and guidance about this project specifically. To our local advocates who've been here from the beginning as well, it matters. This is a project whose time has finally come. It's been decades in the making. And it's because it was decades in the making in terms of the problem. This is a legacy issue. This is an issue of the Robert Moses era, when decisions were made about how to build infrastructure all across this country, and the decisions, frankly, were made with not everyone at the table. And so as a consequence, black and brown communities, low-income communities, were literally missing from every conversation that built this state. And that's what has to change, and that's what's changing now. When I first came to Syracuse as a senator a decade ago, this was the first thing I was advised about. I was told why this was so urgent for the community, why this is so urgent for the economy, and why this had to be my priority too. And so Senator Schumer and I worked on the federal level with your local federal representatives to actually make this a reality. And we have two major pieces of legislation we are hoping that gets in this Build Back Better package. The first one is literally inspired by I-81, and the reason is this. I-81, not only does it divide the 15th Ward, but it divided whole communities from economic opportunity, from the possibility of being part of economic growth, the possibility of founding their own businesses, creating community strength. And it has continued to divide. And moreover, it continues to provide other impacts, like asthma rates. That when a highway goes through your community, you know who suffers the most? Children. Children have higher asthma rates in communities where highways cut them across. Here, it's I-81. In the Bronx, it's 6 different highways crisscrossing the Bronx, making it the highest asthma rate in our state. In Albany, where I'm from, it's 787, street dividing the community from the water. That's the legacy, unfortunately, of our forefathers that we are now trying to fix. And so one of these bills is the Build Back Better bill for Build Local, Hire Local. And that is a bill Senator Schumer and I worked on with the Urban League to guarantee that when we fix these legacy problems, the people who are trained for the jobs are the local community members. And the reason why we have not only our local community advocates, but we have labor in the House is because these are going to be high-paying labor union jobs. They're going to get the best training in the world through local apprenticeship programs, and they're going to get right back to work. And Syracuse is at the forefront of this effort. They're already doing this. It'll be ready to go when Senator Schumer and I bring the resources. So that is why this is so important. And the second bill is the Reconnecting Communities Act. And that is just a simple grant bill where Syracuse can apply for federal money and we will deliver that money to the two-year projects. So I just want to thank everyone here for the vision, for the dedication, for the tireless advocacy that left no one behind, that we are now all at the table so our voices can be heard and we can build our community back better.
Just one final point before we take questions. The entire infrastructure part of this bill, not just the reconnecting communities part, we say that a high proportion of all those new jobs should go to communities of color, to poor people, to people who are paid minimum wage, to people who are part-time. It's going to lift up millions of people from being poor and near poor into the middle class, and that will be a great thing for America. Okay. We're taking questions only on this subject, only on this subject. You go first.
This is for the Secretary. There are so many infrastructure projects going on around this country right now. Where exactly on your list of priorities does
Well, let me say a couple things. First of all, this illustrates something that we've been talking about across the country, and it's one of the most stark illustrations I have yet seen. The air quality issues affecting children that Senator Gillibrand was just talking about, the economic issues of what happened when a neighborhood was literally rolled over and cut in two, and the fact that we're not bringing this up to make people feel guilty. We're bringing this up in the spirit of hope that we can finally do something about it. So there's a reason that this was one of the examples, one of very few specific examples mentioned. Now, the second thing I would say is that the more we are able to fund, the more this effort and every other effort has federal funding available to support it, right? We just did another round of notices related to discretionary grants. There are always more worthy projects than we get a chance to sign off on. Part of what we can do to change that is to get the dollars that we need to literally put our money where our mouth is. That's why this bipartisan deal to put an absolutely historic level of funding behind roads and bridges and a lot of other things is so important, because then we're not saying, is this one of the handful of ones that's going to make it over the post? We're saying the whole country is going to be served.
Okay, let me...
What's that?
No, he's not... Okay.
Highly worthy.
No, let me say something
It's
here.
worthy.
He is, let me just say this in answer to your question. As secretary who's going to make the choices, he's not allowed to pick one over the other. He can't say, but I can. This is at the very top of the list, and I'm going to use my clout as majority leader to put it way, way up there. Okay, next question. Secretary, go ahead.
Discuss the environmental justice concerns that people in the 15th Ward have. Have you guys just discussed that when you were at your roundtable? The lead, the potential for more lead poisoning, the dust. Where can these people go? This will go right to their houses.
Right, yeah, the mayor discussed the many community concerns that have been raised, and this is part of why there has to be a process that is structured locally that includes voices like those represented here and those who come throughout the community, especially from those that have been disempowered or dispossessed in the past. There will never be a perfect project, but what we need to make sure of is that this is a project where all voices are at the table and where everybody is made better off, and that's true across the board, especially when you consider the environmental justice implications of this thing being here in the first place. And there, as the mayor and the leader have said, there may be more adjustments that need to be made to the vision as it goes, and that's a natural and healthy part of the process. But I think the most important and first step is to confront the fact that federal dollars created a problem. They created opportunity, but they also divided. And now's our chance to do something about it across the country.
Okay, nope. Wait. We gotta move it along a little. Can't have. Yes.
For the Secretary of Transportation, there's parts of this county and region still relitigating what the design should be, whether or not high-speed traffic should continue through downtown Syracuse. What would you say to the people not convinced that the current plan is best outside of the city, and what is the status of the project in federal government?
So there's a draft environmental impact statement that is forthcoming. We don't view it as our role to put a thumb on the scale in terms of evaluating, that this alternative is better than the other, provided that it meets the legal requirements that are there. We look to and trust the community to arrive at the right solution. What we want to make sure of, though, is that we've torn down barriers, bureaucratic barriers, and the biggest barrier of all for just about every worthy project out there, which is a simple lack of funding, and make clear our expectations, that justice considerations, environmental considerations, and this local hire element, which is so important. We're doing everything we can with the authorities that we've got. We could be doing a lot more to make sure that the community is represented on the work site, too.
But let me try to answer both questions here. The way this process works, as I read it, in the law itself, is after the grant is given, there's community consultation, and there is adequate opportunity to make changes. We don't want to sit and wait around when we apply. We want to apply and get the money. But the law requires community consultation to deal with some of the issues that might still not have been satisfied when the application is submitted. And there will be ample opportunity for that. Yes. Go ahead.
In the Build Local, Hire Local bill, the projects under that bill are designed for equity reasons. They're designed for communities that haven't had a seat at the table and have been left behind. And so there's two very important pieces of this. And not only are community voices important, but the whole purpose of that one program is to take a project like I-81 and fix the issues. And so that does involve the environmental aspects, as well as the equity aspects, as well as who gets the jobs. And that's about making sure that people whose communities have been disproportionately harmed by past infrastructure investments are the ones who get the jobs.
The basic outline is stayed, but this is not written in stone, and there will be changes. Yes.
I'm wondering if Secretary Buttigieg has seen a project anywhere that is a good example of how a transition like this can be handled and how the community can direct the project and all the housing and the jobs and all the pieces of it. And is there a good template for how that comes together?
So the truth is, we've seen more illustrations of the challenge than we have seen illustrations of solutions. Now, there have been interesting cases around the country. Sometimes it has to do with something coming down. Something it has to do with capping it. It really depends on the specific situation of the community. But I think we can do so much more than has ever been possible if we have the policy support, in other words, administration and congressional support for these principles of equity and community involvement, public health, local inclusion, and of course the funding, right? Communities have never been in a position to do the kinds of things that we believe are called for right now. With the American Jobs Plan, with the bipartisan compromise, we reach a whole nother level in terms of what is possible, so that hopefully, if you ask me that question 3 years from now, I'm pointing to spots around the country that we were able to help support.
And let me give a small project that might have some relevance. It's not exactly the same, and you can't make exact analogies. But several years ago, the city of Rochester came to us about the inner loop. And the inner loop had also been it separated the minority communities from the rest of the city. And we got money for that, and the inner loop is being successful so far. Now, don't make an exact analogy at all, but there are examples where this has worked on a smaller scale. Okay, last question.
attached to this project, how do you intend to make sure that the price of those bids don't come up with less competition coming into put bids on the project?
There's going to be, and I'll let the mayor, there's going to be a competitive process, but we're not going to do this on the backs of labor. We're not going to say we're going to pay people low wages, slave wages, so we can minimize the project. Every program we have will have project labor agreements and be pro-labor.
Yeah, I would just add, and I can't speak to all the details, of course, of the specific effort here, but one of the great examples of the potential of better workforce inclusion comes through these PLAs, these project labor agreements. Of course, we need to get the best value possible for taxpayer dollars, but I would argue a race to the bottom that does it by getting around our high expectations for excellent community support, environment, and labor considerations. That's a bad bargain for everybody, and that's part of what a good PLA can help us deal with, as well as making sure that the workforce in that labor group working on it reflects the community that, after all, this is the community that we're doing this for in the first place.
Last question. Alfonso Davis is very eager to ask a question. We're going to make it. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor, for telling me my name. This is no problem, though, but my question is this. Public housing, Syracuse Housing Authority has Pioneer Homes, Central Village. Right now, the Syracuse Public Housing, Syracuse Housing Authority is trying to marginalize over 4,000 people. They're putting out vouchers and saying you got to get rid of, they got to go because the highway is going to affect how they live, which is, we all know, which is untrue, because DOT said that that's not a fact. But still, if you're moving out so many people, and they're taking them vouchers and give these people vouchers, one, where they're going to go? And two, when you talk about jobs and black and brown people, we never see the majority of people who are at the table don't look like me. I'm from public housing. My grandparents lived in the 50s. They were affected by it. Friends that I know were affected by the disproportionately, I say, coming in and just bulldozing the process to make this happen. And the same thing that they did, excuse me, I'm talking, the same thing.
I'm listening to your question. I just
The same thing
Well, we need a question.
Yeah, the same thing they did back then, they're doing right now. So my question is this. Are they looking to move those people in public housing out? And if they're moving the people in public housing out, where they gonna go? Because the current administration is saying those people gotta go in order for this housing to happen, and we know that's not true.
What's your question?
I just asked my question.
Yeah, his question is, are people in public housing going to be forced to move? And I do not, they're not forced to move. And the other thing is, we are going to, one of the things that Mayor Pete would have mentioned if he spent his whole time speaking, which he kindly did not, but part of the Build Back Better platform, this whole bill, is going to have money for housing, because we want to focus on basic human rights. So if we do this reconciliation package, it's going to have money for housing, low-income housing, community-based housing. We're going to have money for clean water infrastructure. We have lead and other water issues that we're worried about across the state. And we're going to have money for job creation and job training. So that's the whole purpose of doing a larger reconciliation bill, to define infrastructure as all of it. And so I agree with you. We have to make sure when we plan these things that we include all of them. Today we're just talking about this one highway plan, but I promise you, our job, Senator Schumer and I, is to bring money to the mayor and to this community for affordable housing, and to make sure everyone has a quality of life that they have a right to as basic human rights.
In the Build Back Better program, this is housing. The president proposed $40 billion for public housing, and he said that, and that was the largest influx for public housing we've had. We, the New York delegation, I've been the leader on this, proposing to double it to $80 billion. And there will be more help for public housing and more new housing than we have ever seen. So thank you, everybody. Thank